Today we are down at Houston Motorsports to do some demo rides of CF Motos. Now I put out on the channel, I put a question saying who would buy a Chinese-based motorcycle, just because I'm curious. CF Moto is fairly new to the US. They've only been around for about a year in the States. I've never ridden one and they're pretty comparable to a lot of the Kawasaki's. I ride a Versys 650, they have an Adventura 650. I plan to ride a few of them. Now they said that I can't get on riding footage, but I will do some breakdowns before and after of each bike I ride, so stay tuned. This is the 650 Adventura, or Adventura, their ATV bike. This is supposed to be very similar to the Versys 650, which I ride. One thing to note is that a lot of the features are different on this bike compared to the Kawasaki. For example, it's got adjustable suspension, the TFT screen, but a lot of this is similar to the Kawasaki. When speaking with them, they told me that the 650 is one of the oldest platforms that CF Moto's been making, so hopefully it's a refined machine and we'll enjoy it. Check it out. We have LED headlights, LED turn signals, adjustable front windscreen. I believe it actually comes standard with saddlebags too. I don't think they have them on right now for the demos, but that is something that comes with it. We've also got front and rear ABS. Just came off of the 650 Adventura. Wanted to get some thoughts kind of just on film after my first ride. I wouldn't say it's an actual adventure bike, it's more like a commuter bike, a street touring of sorts. It's very well planted, handles really well on the streets. It's light, it's nimble, it's easy to ride. It's priced really well too, guys. Honestly, if you're new to motorcycles, if you're looking for a full-size entry-level bike, not like a 250 or a 300 or a 400, but something that can get out its own way on the highway, it's a great place to start. It's priced well and it comes with a 2-year warranty. It's something to consider. I don't know that it's enough to get me off of my Versys 650 onto an Adventura 650. So I want to see the other bikes. I want to go check out the 800, see what that feels like. That's more of a step up from the Versys 650, but it's priced like the new Versys 650. As with all motorcycles, there are things that are good, things that are bad. So let's talk about some of the good things about the Adventura 650. I mentioned it's priced well. It's low barrier to entry of riding. So if you're brand new to motorcycles, it's a good place to start. There's the 2-year warranty. If you're new to motorcycles, that's great too, because then you can just take it to the dealership for issues that you might or might not have. Service is easy. 3, it's easy to ride. It had 2 different modes. It had a sport mode and an eco mode. It does change some of the EFI, but that really wasn't noticeable when just cruising around town. When talking with the district rep, he mentioned that that's more noticeable above 6,000 RPM, so something to keep in mind there. It was comfortable. The ergonomics were pretty decent. The seat didn't pitch you forward too much. It was a good wide seat, good comfortable seat. The bars themselves didn't have many vibrations. The foot pegs didn't have much vibration. It was generally a good cruise around town type of motorcycle. Now let's talk about some things that I noticed that I didn't like about the 650 Adventura. First and foremost was the shift linkage on the foot shift for the gear selector. I felt like it protruded a little bit too much from the frame and I kept finding myself touching the linkage rather than the lever. Probably something you can get used to after owning it for a little bit, but just jumping on it from a regular motorcycle or a different type of motorcycle, it was noticeable. Even the other models that they have, the linkage is more linear and not as horizontal, so that way it makes it a little bit easier to ride. I'll see if the other ones have the same issue for me in my brain. I've mentioned it on other rides before that I like to keep my toes very close to the frame of the bike, and where the linkage is, my feet basically sit on the shift linkage, so that's something worth noting there. Another really cool thing that I noticed, this is more of a positive than a negative, you can run it on an 87 octane. So it just sips fuel being a parallel twin 650, but you can put 87 octane fuel in it and keep it as low cost as possible, which is very cool for, again, those entry-level riders. I found that when standing, you guys know I'm a motocross rider. I take my Versys off-road. The seat itself is low compared to the foot pegs. So when I stand up, now I'm 6 feet tall. This might be different for somebody else of a different height. I couldn't grab the seat or the tank with my knees. So when standing, it felt like there was a gap there, which is okay because this is not really an off-road bike. This is a bike that is sold as an Adventura, but it's not really an ATV bike. So keep that in mind. This is more of a cruiser. Standing up isn't a necessity, but if it's something you're looking for, just something worth noting there. So I just got off the CLX 700 Sport. Man, that bike was fun. It's got Brembo brakes, master cylinder and calipers, front and rear, sport mode, eco mode. Now the sport mode you can feel on that one. It actually changes where the wanted power band is on the bike. So it puts it into a higher RPM where it wants to play. And second gear around 6,000 RPM, that's when it hits you and it just wants to rip. That bike, even though it's a twin cylinder, it's a parallel twin, it's got some bite to it. It was fun. I would actually consider buying that bike, and it's priced well too. That's around $71. So for $7,100, you can get yourself a fun retro cruiser style cafe racer bike that has some really cool parts on it. Fly-by-wire throttle, Brembo brakes. It really wasn't that hot. It wasn't uncomfortable to ride. It's got that classic look to it. And it comes in cool colors, like the white and the neon yellow, something that I love. It just stands out and it's cool. I like that bike a lot. Now, I will say, the CLX is not meant for having a passenger on the back. The seat itself is very small. On the Sport, the rear seat is the size of maybe, I don't know, a foot. And I mean a person's foot, not a measurable foot. Like, it's tiny. Not something that I would ever put my wife or my kids on. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're looking for a secondary bike, or if you're a solo rider, that's a cool place to be. It's fun, it draws attention, and it's inexpensive. So I'm a sucker for naked bikes, and I love this little 300. This is the 300 NK, also with ABS. Also with the TFT screen. This is probably comparable to like a little Duke. Cool looking bike. This 450 SS looks like it's ready for the racetrack. So we've got spools, we've got adjustable levers, folding levers, lever guards, full-on rear sets, rear spools, even a pretty sporty looking tire. Wonder how much power this is porting out, but as a 450, this is pretty cool. I've never seen a 450 sport bike before. Also with ABS, but check this out. Brembo brakes even. Frame sliders, carbon fiber trim everywhere. The Ibex 800T. It's actually pretty impressive. Lots of factory pieces on it that are in really good working order. Does that motor look familiar to you? Very similar to the KTM 790. Factory center stand, aftermarket pegs, spoked wheels, crash bars, fog lamps. It's a well-built bike. Let's go take it for a spin. Now, when I got back from riding the 800 and talked with the district rep a bit, I said, what else should I ride? He's been making suggestions to me because he wants me to test everything out. He put me on the brand new 450 SS. That's the tricked out race looking super sport with the 450 motor. I actually really enjoyed that little motor and transmission. The bike itself was a bit cramped for me. I'm not a sport bike rider anymore. I've broken my hands and my wrists too many times for me to be comfortable on a super sport all leaned over, but the transmission felt amazing. Like, that bike was begging to be at the racetrack. It brought me back to my days at Jennings GP in Florida, just ripping around the turns. I felt really well balanced on that bike, and I think the best part about that bike was that it's only $5,500. So if somebody's looking to get into a super sport and they just can't get to that, you know, $7,000 mark, you can get into something that's very competitive for substantially less money. And again, I hate to keep harping on this, but it's a big thing. 2-year warranty. I also want to add, I'm not being sponsored or paid to do this. I have no affiliation with CF Moto or with Houston Motorsports at this time. This was just something that they put up on Facebook saying they were having a demo ride. I wanted to go try them just as a consumer. So I approached them. They said, absolutely film it. I'm not saying good things because they told me to. I'm saying good things because I liked it. I'm saying things that a consumer would want to hear. I hope that you guys understand that this isn't too sales pitchy, because I'm not doing anything that I'm benefiting from. I'm just giving you guys the information of my experience on these bikes. I did get to ride the Ibex 800, the full adventure bike. I have to say, it was a pretty cool bike. Now the engine is a KTM based engine. It's very similar to the KTM 790, the Duke 790. I liked it. For what the bike is and for how much it costs, it's very well worth it. I mean, that bike is right around $10,000, so it's a very low entry point for an adventure style bike. That is a true adventure bike, something that's meant to take off-road. It's got the suspension to do it, it's got the wheel sizes to do it, and there's a lot of good parts already on the bike to help with you doing that kind of thing. A test that I've done for all the other bikes that were adventure style bikes was the standing test. That bike was probably one of the most comfortable standing bikes I've been on that isn't a dirt bike. The way that the seat was set up, the way that the tank was shaped, it felt natural to stand, and that was awesome. That was great to feel and to see. It's something that I would be comfortable with going out on the access roads and just cruising at a decent speed through off-road terrain. Now, is it a single track bike? No, absolutely not. Is it competitive with the Africa Twin? Kind of. It's more of a direct competitor to the Tenere 700, and I have the video for the Tenere where I did a first ride of that, so I'll link that above. You can take a look at that. I like the Tenere. I think between the Tenere and the CF Moto 800, I'd go CF Moto. The Tenere is more of an adventure style off-road ready bike, but that means it suffers on the road. And for me and my riding style, I'm on the road more than I am the dirt, so that's definitely something more geared towards what I do. Now, things that I didn't like about the Ibex 800, I felt like right around 4,000 RPM, there was a bit of a flat spot. Now, that's something that can probably be dealt with the tuning, because it is completely fuel injected and tunable, like most other bikes are these days, but there was a bit of a bog and like a dead spot. So you'd be cruising, like right now, I'm at 40 miles an hour, cruising at 4,000 RPM, and it would just kind of go blah. That's tunable. That's not a make or break for the bike. That's not something that's going to make me say I don't want it. The transmission was smooth. Man, actually, that clutch was really good. I really did like the clutch feel. It had a slipper clutch, it had a quick shifter, just well situated for cruising around. Now, there are two different versions of the 800. There's the S and the T. The T is more of, you could say, the tricked out version. It has a lot more aftermarket bits on it. Things like a skid plate, a center stand, bar guards, like all kinds of stuff that you'd want to have on it if you're actually cruising in the woods. And it's not much of a price difference between the two as well. I think it's $1,000 difference, and you get so many more parts on the T. Now, what I rode was the S. The S sits a little bit lower, so it's a little bit easier for somebody who is not used to a giant adventure bike to get on and just have fun with. But that said, I felt like I was sitting in the bike a bit. Like, on my Versus, I feel like I'm on top of it. The bars are a little bit lower, but that plays into the standing aspect. When I stand on the Versus, I have to crouch over a little bit more than if I did on the 800. The 800, I stand up, it was comfortable. I could quite literally just stand and ride for probably 20 minutes without feeling like I was doing something weird. So the all-important question, would I buy a CF Moto? If you've ever watched my channel, you know I'm a Kawasaki guy. I have multiple Kawasaki bikes in my garage right now, and I talk about Kawasaki as if it's part of my family. If somebody gave me $10,000 and said go buy a motorcycle, what would I buy? I think honestly my first thing if somebody gave me 10 grand and said go buy a bike, I'd go buy a 2014 Z1000 in the graphite gray and green, because that bike is just so pretty. But if somebody gave me 10 grand and said go buy a brand new motorcycle, I feel weird saying this, but I would totally go buy that CTX 700. That cafe racer was just, that was a blast, man. That was fun to ride, and it was like 7 grand for Brembo brakes and all kinds of cool aftermarket bits that came factory on this bike. 7 grand is not much to pay, so if I had 10 grand to spend, I'd go buy that for 7 grand and then go buy new gear, a new helmet and stuff like that, because that bike is fun. I'd definitely go ride that again. In videos in the past, specifically the Grom versus Grom clone video that I did, I called it a Grom clone. It is actually a Boom Vader 125, but that bike is meant to be a copy of the Honda Grom. The parts themselves are interchangeable. They look very, very similar. There's very small differences between the two, but it is a clone of a Grom. The CF Moto, I went in with expectations of it being a clone, specifically like the Adventura, the 650. I thought it was going to be a clone of the Versus 650. While it does look very similar, there are enough differences to make me say that it is its own standalone bike. It is similar, it is a comparable bike, but it is not a clone of. You can't take parts from the Versus 650 and stick it onto the Adventura 650. I think that speaks volumes for the manufacturer. I mean, they've only been in the States for a year now, but they've been around for a number of years in Europe and in China. And it's growing in popularity in the US, so that means that there's going to be more of an aftermarket draw. There's going to be more parts available. There's going to be more places that you can buy the bikes, service the bikes, and get parts for the bikes. That's the biggest drawback right now, is that there aren't many dealerships that have them. In Houston, we're getting more and more, so that's awesome. That's something for me I would consider, especially with that warranty. If I buy a bike that has a warranty and I need to take advantage of that warranty, I have to go to the dealership to do that. And now that I think there's 3 dealerships around that have CF Moto for me to go to. I'd consider that as a viable option because it's an easy option. Well, I think that's all I have for you on these bikes and on this manufacturer right now. I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered some of the questions that you had in your head, because they were in my head, about the bikes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll respond to as many comments as I can. I'm not a CF Moto expert. I would highly recommend taking a look at their website, talk to your dealerships about the bikes, about the features and the pricing. Go ask questions. It's something worth checking out, and I wouldn't write it off. So thanks for tuning in. Everybody ride safe out there.